actually has a really long history with Mission Africa. It actually sent somebody out in 1980, so that was the year I was born. And Iris spent 40 years in Nigeria, and she died there and was buried there as well. So this church really has a long association with the mission, and in that way it's a little bit intimidating because I'm relatively new to Mission Africa. I'm not new to mission. When we were at university, we were challenged about mission, about reaching the unreached, and we ended up in the Philippines for 10 years with New Tribes Mission, church planting and discipling over there as well. But rather than me tell you about Mission Africa, there's a short video that you're just going to watch, and that'll give an overview for those of you who don't know, and then we'll pick up from there.
A long time ago. No, I said a long time ago. God began to speak to a nobody from Belfast called Samuel Bill, who wanted to know what part he could play in God's big plan. One day at Bible school, when everyone was enjoying their lunch, as much as anyone can enjoy school lunches, the principal read a letter been sent from a village in the Kwa Ibo region of Nigeria. Who has BO? No, I said Kwa Ibo. Anyway, people from a place that Samuel knew nothing about were asking for someone to come and tell them the good news about Jesus. That sounds great, right? Well, it did, until they heard about the heat, mosquitoes, diseases, and creatures that also lived there. To make things worse, he would have to travel there all by himself. Samuel was an ordinary man, but he knew that God could use him to do extraordinary things. So Samuel packed up his bags and began the long journey to Nigeria. When he finally arrived, he couldn't understand what anyone was saying. Nobody there spoke Belfast. And to make things worse, Samuel began to feel sick, and he saw insects that were bigger than the mice in his bedroom at home. Feeling tired, sick, and all alone, Samuel prayed that God would work in his new home and that the people there would come to know and love Jesus just like him. He asked God to give him helpers and friends, knowing that he couldn't do it alone. Soon David, the son of a scary chieftain, became curious about our Sam, who he thought looked funny, talked funny, and was funny. Samuel told him about the Lord Jesus, who died and rose again to forgive David's sin. David believed what Samuel had told him and became a child of God and the friend and helper that Samuel had prayed for. Samuel and David began to help each other, telling more and more people about Jesus. Soon lots of people began to believe the good news. They stopped living in fear of all the evil spirits and instead worshipped the God who made the spirits. They all began working and worshipping together like one big family to tell everyone about the love of Jesus and their Father in heaven. After faithfully serving God for many years, Samuel and David went on to be with their Father in heaven. Thankfully, the story doesn't stop there, because this story isn't about Samuel, or Mission Africa, or you. This story is about God, and it's actually His story, and it isn't over yet. There are still people today who have never heard the good news, and we want to work together just like Samuel did with David to help teach others about Jesus. We are all nobodies who God is asking to be somebodies that He can use to keep writing His story. We are all different. Some of us might even be a little bit weird. but God has given all of us gifts and skills that He wants to use to be a small part in His big picture to see every person on every nation know the good news of Jesus Christ.
A lot has changed since then. So Samuel Bill went out in 1887, so a long, long time ago, and the world now is a very different place. It's less about going from here to somewhere else, and it's more about going from anywhere to everywhere, and this church represents that. All of the nations that are represented here, and the choir and everybody. Mission is it looks different, but the heart of it is exactly the same. If you were to distill, what does Mission Africa do? What's the heartbeat of Mission Africa? It's basically this that you see on the screen: discipleship through partnership. And you saw that very early with Samuel and David. Samuel realizing he was in a different place, he was overwhelmed, he was unable, he wasn't capable, he needed help. And that is still what Mission Africa loves to do, to partner with others and to see people become disciples. If we go on to the next slide, or do you want me to do that? Or you guys do it? So what we do, we basically don't go solo. We're not going in to do our own thing and be heroes and champions. It's now seeking to work alongside local churches, ministries, and the real simple goal and focus is what Christ commanded us all to do: to reach the lost, to bring the gospel to those who have never heard, to demonstrate His love to people who need care and love and help, and ultimately to make disciples. That is why Mission Africa still exists, and that was the heartbeat of Samuel Bill all those years ago in 1887, and that's why for such a long time Harper supported Iris doing that exact same thing in Nigeria. So go ahead, please. These are the countries that we currently either have mission partners in or have projects in. So Mission Africa makes it sound like we're everywhere, all over the continent. We're not. But these are the current projects that we're in. And we're involved in those different areas with churches or with projects or with a mission partner. And I'll talk a bit about what that is. So go ahead, please. The three main areas are illustrated in that first slide. And it's evangelism, discipleship, and then showing compassion. So that practical love of Christ. And what we would love to do is this verse that Paul wrote to Timothy. So Paul encouraged Timothy, and he said, this is it, Timothy, this is what the mission is. This is what we must do. We must teach people how they ought to behave in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, a pillar and buttress of the truth. So we want to equip, work alongside, mobilize, encourage churches, organizations in Africa to become what God wants them to be, to represent Him in their societies, in their cultures, to become a pillar and buttress of the truth. So whenever people seek God, whenever people have asked questions and are searching, they can go to the church where they will find truth and they will find hope. And so that is the goal of what Mission Africa does. If we go to the next one, please. So Harper's particular connection is with Nigeria. And so I just want to give you some highlights of how we do that in Nigeria. And then anything further or more information, you can chat to Robbie and to Margaret. And Robbie's the handsome man over there on that side. Okay, and now you're all looking, which one is it? Okay. So Robbie and Margaret, they're our Scottish reps. And if you need to know anything in detail, speak to them. So Carla told me, how long we've got, Carla? Okay, but it's already gone a little bit, hasn't it? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to keep it brief. And just give you some highlights of in Nigeria, how we come alongside and do disciples through partnership. So a big area of what we do is theological education. And Iris, that was sent out from here, was heavily involved in that in a Bible college out there. And tonight, you're going to hear more from that college. You're going to hear from the students that are studying there and from the needs and the challenges and some encouragements as well. So theological education is a huge part of what we do in making disciples. Now, we don't own those colleges. They're in the hands of the church that we partner with, the church that began all those years ago with Samuel and David. So that they run it, they organize it, we just go along, we partner, we help by sending lecturers, long-term, shorter-term. We supply materials, textbooks, support, All of those things come alongside to enable people to grow in their knowledge of Christ and then go and work and serve in churches and ministries where they're from in order to make disciples. So scholarships is another aspect of that. You'll see a lady to the, I suppose we could say, south of Nigeria there. Deborah, her name is. So she teaches and works at that Bible college, and she's currently being given the scholarship, and she's completing her PhD to therefore go on and challenge and teach and further equip the Church of God. So theological education is a huge part of it. And we also have child sponsorship program. And I don't know whether some of you have even visited there. I know some of you have been to Nigeria and visited. But the child sponsorship program, again, is a way to show that compassion of Christ to people who need it most. And so we have that on the run. And the goal there is to help school fees, medical fees, practical love and support to the kids and their family, education, but ultimately to see those children, their families, and their community come to know Christ. That is the goal. We work alongside churches in different ways for different means in evangelism, in trying to support, encourage, and equip. On the top, you'll see a picture in the middle, just about there, and that is of the Fulani people group, which spread across much of West Africa. And in Nigeria, there's a lot of conflict, and some of the guys here from Nigeria can tell you in far greater detail about that. There's a big divide, and the Fulani are they're a very diverse people group, and they're quite a strong people group. And so we also would like to seek and reach them. They are an unreached people group that is vast in number and very, very hostile to anything from outside. But you'll see a picture of a man beside that. His name's David Anucci, and he has worked for years as a missionary to the Fulani, and it's been very, very difficult. And he's a unique individual who just felt a call in his life, even when he was in Bible school, and a lot of guys were training to be ministers in local congregations, and he came and he heard about the Fulani, and he just said, God has called me to preach the gospel to them. And he has spent decades working with the Fulani, and it has been dangerous, and it has been difficult, and there's been a lot of discouragements, projects completely ruined, burnt down, chased out. But David continues to serve along with his family and others to reach that people group. And so we as a mission support David in that ministry. So it's not all about going as heroes and champions, it's about supporting the church that is there to reach the people that need the gospel. And so that again is a huge part of what we do. On the top, you'll see a picture of what looks like a library, and that is Africa Christian textbooks. So I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but that came out of Mission Africa about 30 years ago. And that exists to provide good theological material for Africans. So traditionally what was done was a lot of books are sent from the UK, from the States, and they're just, you don't want it anymore, so off it goes to Africa. And the result is people get books that are written sometimes in Old English, using illustrations that don't mean anything from our lifestyle 200 years ago. And sometimes even the point is just so abstract or it doesn't connect. And so Africa Christian textbooks exist to have Africans writing theological material and resources for their own people. And so that's a ministry, again, that we support, that equips churches, believers, Bible colleges, and is contextualized material for the church there. So again, Pamela, that will be on later, she works with ACTS and African Christian textbooks, and that's the ministry that she's involved in. We also have people that partner with Fellowship of Christian Students, kind of like SU in Nigeria, and they equip for schools work, ministry among students, discipling, evangelism. So that is a very, very quick, probably give you a sore head snapshot of what Mission Africa do in Nigeria in particular. And again, if you want to know more, speak to the handsome Robbie. So we go on to the next slide, please. I just want to give you a few things you think, because sometimes when organizations come like this and they say, here's what we do, it kind of leaves you, it's interesting, maybe, but it makes you think, well, what can you do about it? So one of the things I wanted to challenge you on was, this is a picture from a church in Abuja, okay, it's capital in Nigeria, and it's called the Glory Dome. Okay, anyone been there or heard of it? Okay, so this seats 100,000 people. Okay, so it's hard to even imagine what that looks like. So whenever we see things like this, and this is just one of many, many, many mega churches. So we see things like this and we think, is there still a need for mission in Africa? And if you go into Belfast in Northern Ireland, the street preachers in Belfast are African. And so we look at this and I see the street preachers in Belfast and I think, is there still a need for mission in Africa? Just give a click, please. So I was in Chad at the end of February, and a guy from our church in his 30s was messaging me. So a nice start. How's things going? That's good. And that's my reply in the green there. So very, very hot, obviously. And I said, lots of unreached people groups, okay? Hundreds of thousands of people in one people group, no evangelical witness, okay? And that's just a snapshot of Chad. 20 million people in Chad. And this is the response, which I think is interesting. Okay, the first bit, don't worry about. That's true. But you notice there, he says, I hadn't actually realized that there are still some unreached people groups across Africa. And you think, there's not some. Your numbers are massive. There is still a huge need for mission in Africa. And not necessarily for people from here to go there. It's for people there to go and reach these people groups as well. There is still a massive need. The numbers are huge. So there's so much encouragement when we see church growth, when we see people coming from Africa to us in a re-evangelization, but there's still a massive need. The numbers are huge. Millions of people who have never heard the gospel. Give it a click, please. Another challenge is something, if you're familiar with Langham, if you look up Femi Adelaide, he's written a book about this. He's a Nigerian man. And he talks about what we would say prosperity preachers, okay, often called the man of God or apostle or something like this. But this is a massive move coming out of the States into Africa, particularly Nigeria. And the problem here is that people are appointed or self-appointed, and they lift themselves up as someone, the man of God. And quite often they claim to have some special revelation, special authority, and therefore set themselves up as a go-between between people and between God. You need the man of God. And in many cases, people are being manipulated. Money is being extorted from people who do not have the money. The gospel is being misrepresented. It's being told you have to do this, you have to do that. And that is not the gospel. The gospel is you don't do anything because Christ has done it all. And so this is a major challenge and something obviously with theological education we would like to try and address through supporting churches to continue in the gospel. Through producing theological resources that teach the gospel, we want to support. But this is a major challenge, and I'm sure some of you guys can give better insights on that. People are being deceived. They're seeking God, but they're not finding it. They're finding a man of God who is leading them astray in many cases. So pray for that. Give it another click, please. The scholarships is a great way to take part in that as well. Through equipping people, supporting people, and then seeing those people go out, established in the truth, into congregations, into communities, and therefore letting everybody know the true gospel of Jesus Christ. So that's a massive way that anybody can help. Another click, please. Samuel Bill, you see his helmet there. This is what he said, and this is still true today of you here or of anywhere. The main need that we all have in mission is this, that people will come to see and know Christ. So that is the goal of it all. That's why we're doing any of this. Give it one more click. Sorry, go ahead, I'll skip that one. Something that sometimes we say in something like this, you can take part too, you can pray. And it nearly sounds like, well, it's kind of the second option. It's not the second option. Jesus said this when presented with the need of what was around him. He said, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into the harvest. If you just take Africa, you have millions and millions of people who have never heard the gospel. You also have millions of people who think they have the gospel. So really, this isn't the second option. This is the top priority, to pray to the Lord to send out laborers into the harvest. It's huge. Laborers from here, laborers from across Africa. The need is massive, and we need to pray and ask the Lord to do it, to send people out. Thank you.